In North America, you have a lot of mosques being built these days, and a lot of people find that very interesting. So high school students and different clubs and so on, they come for a tour of the mosque. They'll make an arrangement, somebody meets them at the mosque, and they show them around. And there's a frequent comment that people make. They say, we noticed when we were watching the Muslims praying, the women pray behind the men. That's because in Islam, women are less than men, isn't it? That's what they think is the reason for what they see. Women stand behind men. That doesn't have anything to do with why the women stand behind the men. It isn't true in the first place that somehow women are less than men. But that's the impression they have, that's the meaning they think that this has for what they see, and they go away thinking that's the real thing. Unless they have spoken up and somebody's had the good sense to explain to them, no, that's not why women stand behind men. You could look at it in many different ways. The women standing behind the men solves a problem, for one thing. The women could stand in front of the men, but I don't think women would like to do that. I don't think they'd like to perform salah, to make sujood, and there's men standing behind them. That might make them nervous. Or the women could stand beside the men. But I don't think I'd be comfortable trying to pray, and someone's wife is sitting here, somebody else's wife is over here, and my wife is sitting next to somebody over there. Or the women can stand behind the men. Well, that doesn't cause any problems. That's one way of looking at that. It solves a problem, but it doesn't have anything to do with somehow male is better than female. But that's the meaning people give it. That's what they think Islam teaches. So what I'd like to do is mention this and some other things to try to clarify things, to make clear the things that people often misunderstand. Let me give an example now and go into some details of one of the ways that people fool themselves. Yeah, just keep it down a little bit. Start to squeal at me all the time. We can... No, down, not up. Down. Thank you. We fool ourselves if we think in this way. If we have something that we believe in, and then we tend to think, well, what is the opposite of what I believe? Well, the opposite of what I believe must be what everybody else believes, because they don't believe what I believe. That's a way of fooling yourself. That's something like the way the man thinks who thinks, well, now, I believe Jesus died for my sins, so that man must believe Muhammad died for his sins. See, he's tried to find what's the opposite of what I believe, and then he puts that in the mouth of somebody who hasn't said anything so far, but he puts those words in his mouth. He believes that's what he thinks. But the most common example of that the Muslim faces, at least from the aggressive missionary activity, is that, remember, if I'm talking about Christianity, that covers a wide range of kinds of people, and I'm talking now about one particular type of Christian. There is one particular type of Christian who makes a great deal out of saying, what I do cannot save me. I am saved by what I believe. What I do means nothing. What I believe means everything. I am saved by faith and not by works. That type of person very often tends to think, well, now what's the opposite of that? He thinks, if I'm saved by what I believe and not what I do, well, then the Muslim must think he's saved by what he does, not what he believes. He thinks his works are going to save him. And so they put those words in the mouth of the Muslim. They say, you people, you think that you're saved by how hard you work. And before you know it, unfortunately, most Muslims will try and defend that. What's happened is somebody has told the Muslim what he believes, and he starts to defend it without stopping to think, do I really believe that? This man told me that's what I believe. You see, in Islam, to start with, nobody gets saved. Now that will probably bother people who are very concerned about being saved, but it doesn't say anywhere in the Qur'an anybody gets saved. Muslims are not trying to get saved. that is a particular concept that comes from a certain group of churches. They say, look, there's only two choices. You're lost or you get saved. He talks about that so much that gets to be the only thing the Muslims ever heard, and he starts to believe it too. Yes, it's lost or saved. The Qur'an doesn't say that. The Qur'an talks about people being lost. And what's the opposite of lost in the Qur'an? What's the different thing from being lost? It's being successful. Nothing about being saved. Being successful. It means you have a degree of success. You can have more of it and more of it and more of it, depending on the circumstances. But you can be lost or you can be successful. Maybe a little bit, maybe a great deal. That's the contrast in Islam. And that's what eliminates the confusion on the part of the Muslim that may cause some trouble for the non-Muslim, because this is what some people have done. If they think that you are saved or lost, then they say there are only two situations that are going to happen. And you're saved or lost. I mean, you have a reward or a punishment. And that's not a Muslim idea. Nobody is waiting to die so he gets reward or punishment. It's this. If it's not that, it's this. Islam doesn't teach that. It tells you instead, every man is rewarded for the good he did. Everybody, the non-Muslim, the worst of the unbelievers, the enemies of Islam, are rewarded for the good they did. Nobody suffers any injustice. If you did good, you get a reward. If you did bad, you get a punishment. But the punishments and the rewards match the good and the bad. As a matter of fact, the rewards are many times bigger than the good done. But the punishments match the wrong. The punishments fit the crimes. See, the difficulty that some groups of people are in is that they make reward equal salvation. That is, if you say to them, what is your reward for the good you did? They say, paradise. That's not an Islamic idea. Paradise is a reward. Some people get that reward. Some people get other rewards. But when you make reward equal paradise, then you're left in that situation to say, either this man gets the total punishment or he gets the total reward. There's nothing in between. Islam says anybody does even an atom's weight of good, well, then he will get something back for that. Most often, I suspect that the good people do, or whatever they do, they get the reward right here in this life. Or they tell you what they want as a reward, and they may get that too. Somebody told me one time, he was a minister, had his own church. I'd given a talk about who is Jesus and so on. He came to me after and he said, I've written a book about what you said. He said, and you're absolutely right. He said, if the church doesn't accept what you said, in 100 years the church will be dead. He says, I've predicted it in a book I've written. And some of the Muslim brothers are standing around, they heard this, and they're so surprised. They said, well, then why aren't you a Muslim if you agree with him? He said, oh, well, no, I'm not really interested in that. But I've written a book about the subject. And someday, long after I'm dead, people will know that I'm right. And I said, yes, and then what will they do? Will they build a big monument over your grave where you're buried? And his eyes lit up. He said, maybe. That's all he wants. He'll probably get it. He did a good thing. He wrote a book. He told the truth. But if you ask him, what reward do you want? He'll tell you, I'd like him to build a big marker where I'm buried. Well, probably he'll have that. So, nothing, no injustice will be done. That's his reward. He'll get his reward. Myself, I'd rather have a shady tree to sit under in paradise as my reward. So I hope you see the difference that I'm talking about. Punishments have to fit the crime. It cannot be a case of, well, everybody who falls into a category of being bad in any way, he gets the same